Hey, welcome back, guys. So I've got another classical game analysis that I'm really excited to show you. This game features a beautiful attacking idea that I was somehow able to find in the game. In the first one, I showed you one where I had the white pieces, so I decided I'll take one with the black pieces for this second game. You'll see my opponent was named Chris. He is 1373 USCF rated at the time I played him, which was a month and a half ago. He's now somewhere in the 1500 range. My opponent opened the game here with e4, and I decided to play the Sicilian for this one, so I went with c5. Now my opponent went knight f3, and I responded with d6. Nothing crazy, just normal Sicilian theory here. Now my opponent struck in the center with d4. We traded pawns, and here I played knight f6. We're attacking this e4 pawn, and white, of course, defended with knight c3. So now I played knight c6. This is just the classical variation of the Open Sicilian. It's the one that I'm most comfortable with, so this is what I decided to go for this game. Here my opponent played f3. Now, f3 is a move, and I don't really think it's theory, but a lot of players in my rating range play it all the time, so I've kind of had to prepare for it, and I don't fully know why, but I know that the move is e5, so I played e5. It's a little strange to play because we do leave this weakness, this hole on d5 that white will later be able to occupy with his knight. So playing e5 immediately is a little strange for that reason, but there are ways that black can compensate for it. So white plays knight b3 here, and I develop bishop e6, just again, normal developing move here, and now my opponent plays bishop e3. Now I played bishop e7, nothing crazy, just simple developing moves, and my opponent responded with queen d2. So here I went for a5. The idea here is that I want to play a4, and if white allows me to play a4, this knight on b3 is going to have trouble finding a good square. Can't go to d4, can't go to c5 because both of those squares are covered by pawns, and additionally it won't be able to go to a5 because this rook will cover that square. So if white allows me to play a4, his knight would have to run all the way back to c1, which is not a move that white wants to play. And as such, my opponent played a4 himself so that I couldn't play it. Here I castled, another simple move, just developing normally, and my opponent went knight d5. This move makes a lot of sense for white. What white wants to do is take control of this hole on d5. So when I played e5, I left this square d5 empty, and white wants to take control of that. So moving the knight here makes a lot of sense, and ideally, if white can do it, he would like to play c4 as well, so that if I ever take this knight on d5, he'll be able to take back with the pawn and just have this very, very strong pawn chain here. So, of course, I don't allow that, and I take with the bishop. Now, of course, I can't take with the knight, because if I were to take with the knight, then the pawn would take back, and my pieces would be forked. This pawn would be attacking both of them. So I take with the bishop, the pawn takes back, and here I go knight b4. Of course, moving the knight back to a7 or all the way back to b8, both would not be ideal. At least the knight on b4 is active and still doing something. It's adding pressure to this d5 pawn, which white has to respond to. So my opponent plays c4 to defend this pawn on d5. Now I went for a move that is a little weird to look at. I played knight h5, but there is actually an idea behind it. So the reason I played knight h5 is that I want to push this f pawn. I want to play f5 and then maybe even f4 and grab more space on the king side. But of course I can't do that with my knight on f6, so I have to move it first. So I play knight h5, my opponent plays bishop d3, and now I continue with my plan, f5, preparing f4, grabbing more space on the king side. Now my opponent finally castles, and I play f4, just like I planned. My opponent plays bishop f2. So here I played a simple move. I just played b6, just solidifying this a5 pawn. This pawn on c4 is a little weak as well, and it kind of locks it in. Additionally, this move frees our rook on a8. Now our rook doesn't have to defend this pawn on a5, so it's free to do other tasks later on. Now my opponent shuffled his queen to e2, and I played bishop h4. The reason I played bishop h4 is that I actually want to trade off these bishops. You'll see that all of my pawns are on dark squares here, so my bishop wasn't really doing much because it was just staring at pawns. Additionally, we have really good control of these dark squares because of all of the pawns that we have on our dark squares. So if we can trade off these bishops here, then we'll be able to exert all this pressure on this color complex, the dark squares. Here, my opponent plays knight d2, and you're going to see the eval bar start to spike. This is a blunder, and it's not immediately clear why, but I'll show you that there's a beautiful attacking idea. So first we play bishop takes f2 check. Now there are 3 pieces that can recapture this bishop. The queen doesn't want to recapture because that would lose contact with the bishop on d3, so that would just leave the piece hanging. Additionally, the king doesn't want to take because we'll play queen h4 check. The king has to go back to g1, and then we're going to play knight g3, which forks both the rook and the queen. Again, the queen cannot lose contact with this bishop, otherwise we're going to take it. And separately, white cannot capture on g3 because we'll take back with the pawn, and now this king is totally trapped, and we're going to be mating on h2 very, very quickly. My opponent, of course, did not take with the king, though. He actually took with the rook in the game, which is the only piece that really makes sense to take back with. And here is the beautiful attacking idea. Pause the video if you want to try to find this move. It is awesome. Hopefully you're able to find the move. It did happen to be in the thumbnail, so that might have helped, but the move is knight g3. This move is awesome. So the queen can't really move anywhere. The queen is obviously under attack, but the knight also controls the f1 square and the e4 square. Separately, the e3 square is controlled by this pawn, so all of these squares are already controlled. Now the problem is the queen can't move here or here because then this bishop on d3 totally hangs. The other obvious move to consider is, of course, taking this knight, right? It looks like the knight is hanging. Why not just take it with the pawn? Well, if this happens, we would take back, and now we're attacking this rook. And unfortunately, if the rook moves, we're going to play queen h4, and now we're going to be mating on h2 in just a couple of moves. So unfortunately, that means that this rook on f2 actually cannot move, which means on the next move, we would take it, and we would be up material. So all of this goes to show that the queen can't move after knight g3, and additionally, this pawn cannot take the knight on g3 either. So the only other option is to play bishop takes h7 check. This is what my opponent played in the game. Here I took back with the king, and now my opponent took the knight. I take back with the pawn. Of course, he has to take the knight, otherwise we're just up material. And here he plays queen e4 check. So the idea behind this move is if white can check on e4, then perhaps white can control this h4 square, which is so key in checkmating the white king. But of course, we saw all of this when we played knight g3, and we played a very, very nice move here. We played just g6. So the reason we want to play g6 instead of just dropping the king back is that, as you'll see in the game, we actually want to keep this 8th rank open so that we can swing the rooks over and create a battery on this open file. So that's why we play g6 here. Now my opponent plays rook e2, moving his rook to safety. And here I played another very nice move. This is the only move that keeps a big, big advantage for black. The move is rook f4. This is a very key move that you have to see because what we want is to bring this queen over to h4, but the only way to do that is to control that square. So the way we do it is we play rook f4, attacking the queen, forcing the queen back to b1, and then we'll be able to continue with our attack. So as you can see, this knight covers both of these squares, so the queen only has one move, and white plays queen b1. Here, I continue with my plan, queen h4, creating some threats here. If white allows it, we'll play queen h2 check, and after king f1, queen h1 would be checkmate. My opponent responds with knight f1, needs to bring a piece back so that he can cover the checkmating threat. Now I played a really nice attacking move. It's very beautiful because it's just very simple and quiet. I just played king g7, just sliding the king over one square and preparing to bring this rook over to h8, where we'll have the open file now to create, again, more checkmating threats. So here my opponent played rook e4, just trying to activate his pieces, and I continued with my plan, rook h8. Unfortunately, there is no way for white to stave off mate unless you sacrifice material. So my opponent here played knight takes g3, and I took back with the queen. Now we have finally realized a material advantage here. We've had a kingside attack for a while now, but we finally have the material to show for it. So here my opponent played rook a3, again, just trying to activate more pieces and get to the defense. Here I played queen h4, which was actually inaccurate. I could have ended the game in just a couple moves if I had played rook h2. This move creates a threat on g2, of course a checkmate threat, and my opponent doesn't have very many good ways to defend it. If you play something like queen f1, then here I can play queen h4, just dropping the queen back and preparing rook h1 checkmate. Of course, we have, the king completely covered. Separately, my opponent might have played something like rook e2, but here we would just slide the other rook over, and again, this king is totally trapped. Our queen cuts the king off completely, and mate on h1 is just unstoppable. I actually missed this idea though, unfortunately, and I played queen h4. Still keeps a very, very strong advantage though. Here my opponent played queen f1 because he wanted to have this queen actually defended by a piece. Otherwise, I would have played queen h1 myself with check, and I would have won the queen on b1. So here I played queen h2 check. My opponent played king f2 by force. Here I decided just to keep it simple. Let's trade off some pieces. We're up a good amount of material, and we can just get into an endgame where we're undoubtedly going to be winning. So we traded rooks here, and here I played rook f8 check. Of course, the king can't move because then I'll take the queen. So he blocked with the rook, and again, I take with check. We trade another set of pieces, and the pawn can't take here because the pawn was pinned, so that would be an illegal move. Now I played queen f4 check. The king only has one square to go to, so he plays king e2. It would have been perfectly fine here for me to take this queen on f1 with check, force the queen trade, and just move into an endgame where we're up a little bit of material and clearly winning. But I thought it was better to take this pawn on e4 first with check and now try to trade queens. Now, as you can see, we're up 3 full points of material. We're up a full piece, so this is completely winning. So we give a few more checks. We check on e3 here, and we finally can check on d3, where we force the queen trade. Now we're just up a full knight, and this endgame is completely winning. So my opponent plays king c2. I drop my knight back to safety, knight c5, and of course we're attacking the a4 pawn, so my opponent plays b3. And now the game plan is simple. We just want to bring our king to the center, and additionally we want to push this passed pawn. So I play king f6. My opponent goes king c3, and here I go e4, just ready to push this passed pawn and win the game quickly with the queen. Now my opponent played b4, we traded pawns, and I played e3, just pushing this passed pawn one square further. In this position, my opponent actually resigned because there's really not much that white can do. White is forced to bring the king back to try to stop this pawn, and as white does that, I will take this pawn with the knight. The knight is attacking it, and additionally, I'll bring my king to the center, gobble up both of these pawns, and we will easily be able to promote one of these pawns, get it to a queen, and checkmate very quickly. If you guys enjoyed the game, I know you liked that knight g3 move. That was beautiful. Then please give a thumbs up to this video and also consider subscribing. I'm going to be posting a lot more content just like this, so I'll see you in the next one.